Christ of the Covenants Session 60 诸约中的基督第60讲 David, the Covenant of the Kingdom 大卫之约国度之约。那现在我们来处理一个问题 The Davidic Covenant conditional or unconditional 大卫的约是带有条件的约还是无条件的 This is the third distinctive question related to this covenant. 这个是与大卫之约有关的第三个独特的问题 Page 243 243页 The third and final question concerning the Davidic covenant has to do with the type covenant involved. 第三也是最后一个与大卫之约有关的问题呢，是有关于这个约究竟是哪一类型的约 Is the Davidic covenant to be regarded as conditional or unconditional? 我们应该看大卫之约是有条件的还是没有条件的呢？ Are its promises contingent on a certain response in David and his descendants? 约里面的应许是不是看大卫和他的后裔的回应而定的呢？ Or does this covenant guarantee the fulfillment of its gracious provisions unconditionally? 还是说这个约呢无条件的保证他所提供的恩典必定成就必定实现呢？ Various perspectives on this question 对这个问题不同的观点角度 This question has been viewed from a variety of perspectives 学者们从不同观点角度来处理这个问题 Primarily the problem has been framed in terms of whether the Davidic covenant connects with the Abrahamic or the Mosaic covenant as its predecessor. 学者们主要从这个架构来处理这个问题的。大卫之约究竟是与亚伯拉罕之约相连呢，还是与摩西的约相连呢？大卫之约的所谓祖先是亚伯拉罕之约呢，还是摩西之约呢？ R.C. Clements, C-L-E-M-E-N-T-S 这位学者 asserts that 他坚持说 the type covenant made with David could not possibly have arisen by a process of natural development out of the Mosaic covenant. 上帝与大卫所立的约的类型呢，是不可能从摩西之约延伸出来一个的自然的发展过程所形成的。Instead, 反之 David's covenant represents a recollection of the ancient covenant made with Abraham. 大卫之约是代表着一种的回忆，以色列人回忆当年在古时候上帝与亚伯兰所立的约的。Clements suggests even more radical modifications of the biblical picture. Clements 这位学者呢，会更加的极端的修改圣经所描绘出的图画的。From his perspective, 从 Clements 的角度来看 the Davidic covenant, although represented in scripture as having come almost 1,000 years after the Abrahamic covenant, 大卫之约虽然从圣经的角度来看是在亚伯兰之约之后的1000年才出现的 actually played a crucial role in the Israelite formulation of the Abrahamic covenant. 事实上呢，大卫之约呢扮演一个很关键性的角色，让以色列人呢制定亚伯兰之约的。He is quite sure that 他非常的确定认为 there was a material connection between the tradition of Abraham and the rise of David. 亚伯兰的传统和大卫的兴起之间有一种实质上的连结的 and the fortunes of the Davidic house greatly affected in Israel the ancient covenant with Abraham. 而大卫的王朝的兴衰呢，在以色列里面是深深的影响到古时候相当于亚伯兰所立的约的。According to the thesis of Clements, 根据 Clements 的论点 all three major promises associated with the Abrahamic covenant must be seen as arising out of the political situation of the Davidic epoch。与亚伯拉罕之约有关的3个主要的应许，都是源自大卫时期的政治的处境的。The promise concerning the land， 上帝对地的应许呢 ，grew out of the expansion of the territorial state of David， 是因为大卫的国家的疆界扩大所导致的。The promise of the seed， 关于后裔的应许呢 ，developed from the reality of a national entity formed under David， 是因为在大卫的领导之下呢，一个整个国家就成为一个事实，这个导致后裔的应许的。The Abrahamic promise concerning the blessing to non-Israelite peoples， 而亚伯拉罕的约里面那个应许，就是说对非以色列人的民族所带来的福分呢 ，assumes the existence of nations subject to David， 就假设着有一些的国家是服在大卫的权之下的。这个是 Clemens 的理论。While for Clemens, the Abrahamic and Davidic covenants interrelate closely。虽然对 Clemens 来说，亚伯拉罕之约跟大卫之约之间有着密切的相连 ，No such connection between David and Moses is possible。可是大卫和摩西之间就不可能有这种的结连了。Clemens affirms that Clemens 他肯定说 ，The Davidic covenant is formally to be distinguished from the type of law covenant found in the Sinai-Horeb tradition。大卫之约呢，在形式上是与西乃和列山这个传统的律法之约呢是有所区别的。这个第一个学者的观点角度 Clemens。第二 Bernard Anderson also chooses to emphasize 2 types of covenants which set apart the Davidic from the Mosaic covenant， 也强调有2种不同的约，这样子大卫之约和摩西之约是有所区别的。The Mosaic covenant represents for Anderson， 对 Anderson 来说，摩西之约是代表着 the type covenant that is founded on stipulated obligations， 是建造在一些的规定和人的责任这个基础上的 ，and ultimately leads to chaos。因此呢，最终呢是导致混乱的。God's covenant with David, however， 可是上帝与大卫所立的约呢 ，creates stability and continuity， 所带来的是稳定和连续性。By emphasizing promise， 因为大卫之约所强调的是应许 ，it holds in check the unpredictable and disruptive tendencies of undisciplined humanity， 它就有一股的约束力控制着没有纪律的人们那些不可预测的破坏性的倾向。The Davidic covenant is, for Anderson, a covenant which removes the elements of contingency。对 Anderson 来说，大卫之约是一种排除偶发性的因素的约 ，and provides a divine guarantee of order, stability, security， 提供着一种从上帝所来的保证，保证着秩序、稳定和安全。Its promise is absolutely unconditional， 而这种的约的应许是绝对的无条件的。第二位的学者 Anderson。Exactly the opposite opinion concerning the Davidic covenant has been expressed by other scholars， 但是其他的学者们对大卫之约表达了完全相反的意见。Instead of connecting David's promises with those of Abraham， 他们不把大卫之约的应许与亚伯拉罕之约连结。They relate them instead to the stipulations of the Mosaic covenant， 他们把这些的应许呢与摩西之约的规定连接起来。M. Tsevat T-S-E-V-A-T 这位学者 suggests that the rise of David to power in Israel cannot relate to the sacral traditions of the tribal confederacy。 大卫在以色列的兴起，大卫的掌权不可能与那些部落的邦联的 献祭的传统有关的。Despite the attempt of 2 Samuel 7 to make just such a connection， 虽然撒母耳记下第7章就是尝试要做这种的连结。Savad concludes that， 这位学者 Savad 的结论是 The Davidic covenant must be related to Sinai， 大卫之约必定是与西乃的约连结的 since the tribal confederacy had its formation at that point in Israelite history， 因为部落的邦联就是在以色列的历史那一刻形成的，就是在西乃山上形成的。As a result， 结果是 an inner contradiction must be seen in the substance of 2 Samuel 7。因此呢，在撒母耳记下第7章的实质上呢的这个内容里呢，就有着一个内在的矛盾。The covenant with David rests on the conditional structures of Sinai。大卫之约是建立在西乃山上一些的有条件的架构之上的。And the wholly unconditional assurances found in 2 Samuel 7:13b to 16 are out of place。而在撒母耳记下第7章13节下到16章，那些的完全无条件的保证呢，就很明显的是格格不入了。And therefore must be concluded that， 因此这番说我们必须做这个结论，就是 These verses represent a later gloss， 这些都是后来文士加上的注释 which does not belong to the essence of the Davidic covenant， 这些都不属于大卫之约的核心意义的。Savad also proposes that， Savad 也建议说 the repeated emphasis on the eternal character of the Davidic covenant must be modified。 我们必须修改在大卫之约里面多次所强调的这个永恒性。Only in the context of the intrinsic qualification of the covenant may this promise be regarded as eternal。 我们若要以为上帝的应许是永恒的话，我们必须放在这个架构来考虑，就是说这个约本身有一些本质上的条件性的 so long as faithfulness is maintained， the line of David shall be preserved， 大卫的后裔能够保存下去，坐在王位上，若他们继续的尽忠。 The covenant is eternal only in this qualified sense， 所以约是从这个条件性的角度来看是永恒的。刚才我们读了不同学者们所采的3个不同的观点角度，第一个是 Clements， 第二个是 Anderson， 第三个是 Savad。 Proposed resolution of the question， 对这个问题的建议的解决方案。 The question concerning the conditional character of the Davidic covenant must be viewed from various perspectives。 我们必须要从不同的观点角度来处理关于大卫之约是否条件性的这个问题的。 The structurally simple bond of the covenant involves a complexity of relationships。 约这个架构上很简单的连结呢，是牵涉到一些很复杂的关系的。 First of all， 首先 some distinction must be made between factors of conditionality within a covenant and certainty of realization with respect to the ultimate goal of the covenant。 我们必须做一些的区分，一方面就是约里面有一些条件性的因素，另外一方面约的至终的目的是肯定会实现的。 The covenant which God established with David fitted integrally into God's purpose to redeem a people to himself。 上帝与大卫所设立的约呢，是在整个上帝的计划，就是要救赎他的子民归属于他，在他的救赎里面有着一个不可或缺的地位的。 This fact assures the ultimate realization of the promises made to David。 这个事实就保证着向大卫所做出的应许至终必定实现的。 The Lord of this covenant shall not be thwarted in his intention to bring sinners out of the realm of darkness into his gracious domain. 盟约的主，他的用意就是要把罪人从黑暗的权势带进他的恩典的权势里，这个计划必不挫败的。Is it certain that God's purposes to establish a kingdom for himself among redeemed sinners shall be realized? Nothing could be more certain. 上帝的计划就是要设立一个国度，在蒙救赎的罪人中设立一个为他自己荣耀的国度。这个计划是否肯定会实现呢？没有什么事比这个更加肯定的。Shall covenant loving kindness be taken from David as it was taken from Saul? Unquestionably, it shall not. 上帝在约里的恩慈是否会从大卫那里夺回，好像在扫罗的身上夺回一样呢？肯定不会。The purposes of God to establish a messianic royal line through David never shall be thwarted. 上帝的计划就是要透过大卫设立一个弥赛亚的王朝，必不失败的。The word of certainty concerning the line of David must be seen as an organic whole with the previous covenantal expressions of God's purpose to redeem a people to himself. 上帝对大卫肯定的应许，就是关于他的后裔的应许，必须从一个整全的整体来看。就是说，上帝在先前的约里面都表达了他的旨意，必定要救赎子民归属于他的。In this respect, 从这个角度来看呢， the question concerning the conditionality of the Davidic covenant comes wrongly framed when it is asked in terms of whether the Abrahamic or the Mosaic covenant served as its immediate predecessor. 所以呢，从这个角度来看，我们若要问大卫的约是否条件性呢，就问错了。因为当我们问亚伯拉罕之约还是摩西之约是大卫之约的前身呢，这个问题是问错的。All the various manifestations of the covenant of redemption in Scripture contain this aspect of certainty of revelation. 在圣经里救赎之约里的各种不同的彰显的版本呢，都有这个肯定必定实现的这个层面的。God himself assumes the total responsibility for the fulfillment of the covenant with Abraham. 上帝对实现亚伯拉罕之约是完全负责的。Only the theophany passes between the pieces. 唯有上帝的显现才是走过那些肉块的创世纪第15章。It is unthinkable that God would not have brought his people into Canaan under the ordinances of the Mosaic covenant. 若说上帝呢，根据摩西之约的规律，不会把他的子民带进迦南地呢，是不可思议的。His determination to chasten the wicked without partiality is apparent. 很明显的，他决意要管教，要惩罚犯罪的恶人，这个是明显的。Even Moses himself received correction at the Lord's hand. 就算摩西也从上帝的手中领受了管教。But it is unthinkable that God would fail to bring his people Israel through the desert into Canaan. 但是若以为上帝可能会失败的不把他的子民以色列人从旷野带进迦南地呢，是不可思议的。His purposes to redeem a people to himself shall be realized. 他必定实现他的计划，救赎他的子民归属于他。Even at the point of greatest apostasy, 就算在以色列人最大的离经背道的时刻， the certainty of God's realizing his purposes is guaranteed. 我们有保证，上帝必然的会实现他的计划的。God may blot out all Israel. 上帝可能灭绝所有的以色列人 but he shall raise up a new nation from the Israelite Moses. 但是他会从一位以色列人摩西兴起一个新的一个国度的refer to Exodus 32 verse 10， 参考出埃及记32章第10节，你且由着我，我要向他们发烈怒，将他们灭绝，使你的后裔成为大国。The non-observance of Mosaic stipulations certainly will bring punishment. 若不遵守摩西之约里的规定，肯定会招致惩罚 ，but it will not bring annihilation. 那上帝不会把以色列人全然的灭绝的。The certainty of God's consummating his purposes of Israel cannot be attributed merely to the Abrahamic covenant. 上帝必然把他在以色列身上的计划带到终点，这个肯定性呢，不能够只是归于亚伯拉罕之约的。It must be remembered， 我们必须记得 that it is a Mosaic covenant that receives cultic renewal as the people enter the land。我们必须记得，当以色列人进入到应许之地的时候，所更新的是摩西之约。This covenant of national election， 这个上帝拣选整个国的约 continues to be in effect as well as God's covenant with the patriarchs， 是继续生效的，就等于上帝与亚伯拉罕、以撒、雅各所立的约仍然生效一样。Now, a second question concerning conditionality in the covenant may be asked. 那我们现在可以问另外一个第二个问题，是关于大卫之约是否有条件的。What about individual participation in the blessings of the covenant? 那么个人在约里的福分有份，这个问题又如何呢？ Under Abraham， 在亚伯拉罕的约之下 ，the uncircumcised male was to be cut off. 不受割礼的男性是要被剪除的。Under Moses， 在摩西之约之下 ，the disobedient would not enter God's rest。不顺从的以色列人不能进入到上帝的安息的。Under David， 在大卫之约之下呢 ，the sinful king was to be beaten with the rod of men。犯罪的王要用人的杖击打的。In each case， 在每一次 full participation in the blessings of the covenant had a condition。若要完全在约的福分里有份呢，是有条件的。Only as this condition was fulfilled would blessing be assured。人必须要守住这个条件，才能够保证的得到福分的。So it may be affirmed that， 所以我们可以这样的肯定说 ，each of God's covenants has a conditional aspect。上帝的每一个约都有一个有条件性的层面的。The purpose of God to redeem a people to himself makes it certain， 上帝有他的计划，要为他自己救赎他的子民归属于他。这个计划就让下面这件事情肯定，就是 that these conditions shall be met， 就是说他这些的条件必定会被满足的。But this certainty cannot relieve the individual from his obligation before the stipulation of the covenant。 可是呢，上帝必定保证人满足这个条件呢，并没有让个人的责任除去的，他必须要守住约里面上帝所规定的。Still a third factor must be considered。 我们还有一个第三个因素必须要考虑到的，还有第四个，我们下次讲这个第三和第四个因素。